Maya was just 17 when her whole world changed forever. She lived in a small, hidden community tucked away in the mountains, far from the busy cities and modern life that most people knew. This wasn't just any ordinary village. It was a place where everything was controlled, where every decision was made by the elders, and where young people like Maya had no say in their own futures. The community had existed for over 50 years, completely cut off from the outside world. No internet, no television, no contact with anyone beyond their borders. The people there believed they were special, chosen to create a perfect society. But what Maya didn't fully understand yet was just how dark and twisted their idea of perfection really was. On a cold morning in early spring, Maya woke up to find 3 elderly women standing in her family's small wooden house. Her mother was crying silently in the corner, and her father looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. The women wore long, dark robes and had serious expressions. That made Maya's stomach twist with fear. "You have been chosen," the tallest woman said in a voice that echoed through the tiny room. "Your bloodline has been studied, your health records reviewed, your mental capacity tested. You meet all the requirements for the sacred program." Maya had heard whispers about this program. Her entire life, young women would disappear from their families, move to a special building on the other side of the community. Some said it was an honor. Others spoke in hushed tones. When they thought no one was listening, Maya always wondered what really happened to those girls, but asking questions wasn't allowed in their community. "I don't understand," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "What program? What are you talking about?" The second woman stepped forward, holding a thick folder filled with papers. "For generations, our community has worked to create the perfect next generation. We carefully select young women with the best qualities, intelligence, health, beauty, and most importantly, the ability to bear strong children. You, my dear, have been chosen to be part of this sacred mission." Maya's hands started shaking. She looked at her parents, hoping they would protect her, say something, do anything to stop this. But her father just stared at the floor, and her mother continued to cry silently. She realized then that they had known this day would come. They had been preparing for it, dreading it, but knowing they were powerless to stop it. "You will be moved to the preparation facility today," the third woman announced. "There, you will receive proper nutrition, education, and training for your important role. You should feel honored. Not every girl is selected for such a sacred purpose. Within hours, Maya's few belongings were packed into a small bag. She wasn't allowed to bring much, just basic clothes and one personal item. She chose a small wooden bird her grandfather had carved for her when she was little. It was the only thing that felt like home that she could take with her the walk across the community felt like the longest journey of her life. People came out of their houses to watch, some nodding approvingly, others looking away with what seemed like sadness or maybe guilt. Maya realized that everyone knew what was happening. This wasn't new or unusual. It was just another day in their controlled world. The preparation facility was unlike anything Maya had seen before. It was a large, modern building that looked completely out of place in their rustic community. Inside, everything was clean, white, and sterile. It reminded her of the medical clinic, but bigger and more intimidating. A woman in a white coat greeted them at the entrance. She was younger than the elders, but had the same cold, calculating look in her eyes. "Welcome to your new home," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My name is Dr. Helen, and I will be overseeing your preparation." Maya was led down a long hallway lined with doors. Through some of the open doors, she could see other young women, all around her age, sitting quietly or reading books. They looked up as she passed, their faces showing a mixture of resignation and something else, maybe fear, maybe sadness. Her room was small but comfortable. A single bed, a desk, a chair, and a small closet. The window looked out onto a garden, but Maya noticed the bars on the glass. They were decorative, painted white to look pretty, but they were bars nonetheless. "Your schedule will begin tomorrow," Dr. Helen explained, handing Maya printed paper. "Breakfast at 7, physical exercise at 8, educational sessions from 9 to 12, lunch, rest period, more education from 2 to 5, dinner, and personal time until lights out at 9. This schedule will be followed every day without exception. Maya looked at the schedule, her heart sinking. Every minute of every day was planned out for her. There was no freedom, no choice, no time that was truly her own. What kind of education? She asked quietly. You'll learn about nutrition, child development, proper behavior, and your role in our community's future. You'll also receive medical examinations to ensure you're healthy and ready for the program. Dr. Helen's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she was discussing the weather rather than Maya's entire life. That first night, Maya lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. She could hear soft crying from the room next door, and she wondered if the girl there was new to, or if she had been crying every night for months. The wooden bird sat on her bedside table, and she held it tightly. Trying to remember what freedom felt like, she thought about her little brother back home, probably wondering where she went. She thought about the books she would never finish, reading, the places in their mountain valleys she would never explore again. Most of all, she thought about how she had never been asked what she wanted, never given a choice about her own future. The next morning began exactly as the schedule promised. Maya joined 12 other young women in the dining hall for breakfast. The food was better than what she had eaten at home: fresh fruits, protein, vitamins. Everything was designed to make them as healthy as possible, like prize animals being prepared for show. During the first educational session, Maya learned the truth about why she was there. The community's leaders had developed what they called a scientific approach to creating superior children. They had studied genetics, tracked family histories, and identified the young women most likely to produce intelligent, healthy offspring. You are not just individuals, the instructor explained to the group. You are part of something much larger and more important. Your contribution will help create the next generation of our community's leaders. Maya raised her hand. Something that took all her courage. But what if we don't want to be part of this? What if we want to choose our own lives? The room fell silent. The other girls looked at her with wide eyes, some with admiration, others with terror. The instructor's expression hardened. Individual desires are selfish and destructive. You have been chosen because you have the potential to serve a greater purpose. Learning to put aside personal wants is part of your preparation. As the days turned into weeks, Maya began to understand the full scope of what was planned for her. She would be paired with a man chosen by the elders, someone selected for his genetic qualities and loyalty to the community. Their relationship would be purely functional, designed to produce children who would carry on the community's beliefs and bloodline. But something inside Maya refused to accept this fate. Maybe it was the way the mountain wind sounded different through her barred window, or the memory of her grandfather's hands carving that little wooden bird with such care and love. Maybe it was simply the human spirit's natural desire for freedom. Whatever it was, it grew stronger every day, like a seed taking root in her heart. She began to notice things others seemed to miss: the way the guards changed shifts, the routines of the staff, the small moments when nobody was watching too closely. She started to realize that even in this controlled environment, there were cracks in the system. And in those cracks, Maya began to see the possibility of something the elders had never planned for: the chance to choose her own path, no matter how impossible it seemed. 6 months had passed since Maya first walked through the doors of the preparation facility. The routine had become second nature. Wake up, exercise, study, eat, sleep, repeat. But something was changing inside her, something the elders hadn't planned for when they designed their perfect system. It started with small things. The way she noticed how the other girls had stopped laughing altogether, how their eyes had become dull and empty, like they were slowly disappearing from the inside out. Maya realized she was watching people lose themselves piece by piece, and she refused to let the same thing happen to her. During their supervised walks in the garden, Maya began to pay attention to details she had missed before. The facility wasn't just a building. It was surrounded by beautiful gardens. maintained by workers from the community. These workers were different from the staff inside. They moved freely, talked quietly among themselves, and seemed to have something the girls in the facility had lost: hope. One of these workers caught Maya's attention more than the others. He was young, maybe a few years older than her, with gentle eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. While the other workers focused on their tasks, he would sometimes glance toward the girls during their walks, and Maya noticed something in his expression that she hadn't seen in months: genuine concern. His name was Alex, she learned from overhearing other workers. He tended to the vegetable gardens that supplied food for the facility, and he worked with a quiet concentration that reminded Maya of her grandfather. There was something peaceful about watching him work, something that made her remember what it felt like to be human rather than just a part of someone else's plan. The first time they actually made eye contact, Maya felt something electric pass between them. It was just a moment, but in that moment, she felt seen as a person, not as a project. Alex quickly looked away, but not before Maya caught something. In his expression, recognition, maybe even understanding. Days passed before they had their first real interaction. Maya was walking in the garden with two other girls when she stumbled on the uneven stone path. Before the supervisor could react, Alex was there, steadying her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The supervisor was dealing with another girl who had scraped her knee. Giving them just a few seconds alone. "I'm fine," Maya whispered back, but as she looked into his eyes, she realized she wasn't fine at all. She was drowning in a system that saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. And this stranger's simple act of kindness felt like a lifeline. "You don't have to be what they want you to be," Alex said quickly, so quietly that Maya almost missed it. Then he was gone, back to his work, leaving Maya standing there with those words echoing in her mind. Those 8 words changed everything. They were the first words anyone had spoken to her in months that treated her like a human being, with choices, with value beyond her biological function. That night, Maya held her wooden bird and repeated those words over and over, feeling something inside her chest that she had almost forgotten, the spark of rebellion. Over the following weeks, Maya began to look for Alex during their garden walks. She learned his patterns, knew which areas he would be working in at different times of day. She started to notice things about him, how he treated the plants with care, how he would sometimes pause to watch birds in the trees, how he seemed to carry himself with a quiet dignity that no one could take away. Their second conversation happened when Maya pretended to be interested in the flowers. Near where Alex was working, the supervisor was distracted, reading something on her clipboard. And Maya took the chance. "Thank you for what you said," she whispered, pretending to smell a rose. Alex continued weeding, not looking up. "I used to have a sister your age," he said quietly. "She would have hated this place." "Used to have?" Maya asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "She left the community 3 years ago, walked away one night, and never came back. Everyone said she was selfish, that she abandoned her duty. But I think she was the bravest person I ever knew." Maya's heart raced. Someone had left. Someone had actually escaped this place and made it to the outside world. The possibility had never seemed real before, but hearing Alex talk about his sister made it feel suddenly impossibly real. "Do you know where she went?" Maya asked. Alex finally looked up, checking to make sure the supervisor wasn't listening. "No one knows. But sometimes I get letters. No return address. Just a few words to let me know she's okay. The last one said she was happy. That's all I need to know." From that day forward, Maya began to see Alex as more than just a kind stranger. He became a symbol of everything she was fighting to preserve in herself. The ability to choose, to think, to dream of something different. And slowly, carefully, they began to build something that was strictly forbidden in their controlled world. A genuine connection. Alex started leaving small gifts for Maya to find during her walks. A pressed flower tucked behind a loose stone. A small sketch of a bird drawn on a piece of bark. Once a rolled-up piece of paper with a poem written in careful handwriting. These tiny acts of rebellion were more precious to Maya than anything she had ever owned. Through these secret exchanges, Maya began to learn about the world beyond their community. Alex told her about cities with millions of people, about schools, where students could choose what to study, about jobs that people picked because they loved them, not because they were assigned. He painted pictures with words of a world where women could decide their own futures, where love was something that grew naturally between people, rather than something arranged by committees. But more than information about the outside world. Alex gave Maya something even more valuable, the feeling that she was worth caring about as an individual, in a place where she was constantly reminded that her only value was her ability to produce children for the community. Alex saw her as a complete person with thoughts, dreams, and feelings that mattered. Maya began to change in ways that worried her supervisors. She asked more questions during educational sessions, pushed back against rules that seemed arbitrary, and carried herself with a confidence that hadn't been there before. Dr. Helen noticed the change immediately. "You seem different lately, Doctor," Helen observed during one of Maya's regular evaluations. "More resistant. Is there something troubling you?" Maya had learned to be careful. "I'm just thinking about my future," she said, which was true, though not in the way Dr. Helen would expect. "Good." Dr. Helen smiled. "Your pairing ceremony is being scheduled for next month. The elders have chosen an excellent partner for you, strong, intelligent, completely dedicated to our community's mission. You should be honored." But Maya didn't feel honored. She felt trapped, desperate, and more determined than ever to find a way out. That night, she looked out her barred window at the garden where Alex worked, and for the first time since arriving at the facility, she began to plan for a future that was entirely her own choosing. The girl who had arrived 6 months ago had been scared and confused, but the woman she was becoming was angry, determined, and ready to fight for her freedom. Alex had awakened something in her that no amount of conditioning could destroy. The unshakable belief that she deserved to choose her own path, no matter how impossible it seemed. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. Dr. Helen stood before the 13 girls in the dining hall, her clipboard in hand and that familiar cold smile on her face. Maya's heart was already racing before she even heard the words. "Maya, your pairing ceremony has been scheduled for 3 weeks from today," Dr. Helen announced. "The elders have chosen wisely. Your partner is highly regarded in our community, strong, intelligent, and completely committed to our mission. You should consider this a great honor." Maya felt the room spinning around her. 3 weeks. 21 days. That was all the time she had left before her life would no longer be her own. She looked around at the other girls, some nodding approvingly, others staring at their plates with the same empty expression they always wore. But Maya felt something different burning in her chest, pure, desperate determination. That afternoon, during their garden walk, Maya knew she had to take the biggest risk of her life. She had to tell Alex what was happening, and more importantly, she had to find out if the impossible dream they had been building together could somehow become reality. Alex was working in the herb garden when Maya approached. She pretended to be interested in the mint plants, while the supervisor chatted with another worker nearby. Her hands were shaking as she whispered, "They scheduled it. 3 weeks." Alex's hands stilled on the plants. He understood immediately what she meant. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Really talk. Tonight. After lights out. Can you get to the window on the east side of your hallway?" Maya nodded, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. This was it, the moment when her rebellion would either become real or end in disaster. That night, Maya waited until she was sure everyone was asleep. She slipped out of her room and crept down the hallway to the east window. The facility was quiet except for the sound of her own breathing and the distant footsteps of a guard making his rounds. She pressed her face to the glass and saw Alex standing in the shadows below. Through the window, Alex told her what she had been hoping and fearing to hear. "I've been watching this place for months," he whispered. "I know the guard patterns, the weak points in the security, the times when we could get out undetected. My sister left me information before she escaped, safe places, people who help refugees from communities like ours. Maya's heart soared and crashed at the same time. You want to leave too? I can't stay here and watch what they're doing to you and the other girls, Alex said. I can't pretend this is normal or right. If you're brave enough to try, I'll help you get out. But Maya, you need to understand. Once we leave, there's no coming back, ever. The weight of that decision pressed down on Maya like a physical force. Leaving meant abandoning everything she had ever known, everyone she had ever loved. It meant walking into a world she had never seen, with no guarantee of safety or success. But staying meant losing herself completely, becoming nothing more than a tool for someone else's vision of perfection. I'd rather die free than live as a prisoner, Maya whispered back, and as she said the words, she realized she truly meant them. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya and Alex worked together to plan their escape. Every conversation was a risk. Every shared glance potentially dangerous. Alex taught her about the outside world through whispered conversations and tiny notes. He told her about money, about jobs, about how people live when they could make their own choices. Maya, meanwhile, began to prepare herself mentally and physically. She started doing extra exercises in her room, building her strength for the journey ahead. She studied the facility's routines more carefully, noting when guards changed shifts and which areas were less carefully watched. Most importantly, she held onto the hope that was growing strong every day. But their plan hit a devastating snag when Dr. Helen made an unexpected announcement. Due to scheduling changes, Maya's pairing ceremony has been moved up. She said during a routine meeting, "It will now take place this Saturday, 5 days from now." Maya felt her world crumble. 5 days wasn't enough time. They hadn't finished planning, hadn't gathered enough supplies, hadn't figured out all the security details. But as she looked at Alex, through the window that night, she saw the same determination in his eyes that she felt in her. "Hard, we go tomorrow night," he said simply. "It's not perfect, but it's our only chance." The next day was the longest of Maya's life. Every minute felt like an hour. Every routine activity felt like it might be the last time she would ever do it. During lunch, she took an extra piece of bread and hid it in her pocket. During their afternoon walk, she memorized every detail of the garden, knowing she would never see it again. That evening, Maya wrote a letter to her parents. She poured her heart onto the paper, explaining why she had to leave, thanking them for the love they had given her, and promising to find a way to contact them someday if it was safe. She left the letter hidden in her room, knowing it would be found after she was gone. At midnight, Maya slipped out of her room for the last time. She had packed only the essentials, a change of clothes, the bread she had saved, and her grandfather's wooden bird. Everything else she left behind, including the life that had been planned for her since birth. Alex was waiting at the predetermined meeting spot behind the facility's maintenance building. He had a small backpack and a look of nervous excitement that matched Maya's own feelings. "Are you ready?" he asked. Maya looked back at the facility one last time, thinking of the other girls still sleeping inside, still trapped in the system she was about to escape. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They moved through the shadows like ghosts, following the route Alex had memorized over weeks of careful observation. The guard at the main gate was dozing, just as Alex had predicted. The fence at the east perimeter had a section where they could slip through, hidden by overgrown bushes. As they reached the edge of the community's borders, Maya felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration unlike anything she had ever experienced. Behind them lay everything familiar, everything safe, everything controlled. Ahead lay the unknown, dangerous, uncertain, but absolutely free. Alex took her hand as they stepped beyond the fence. "Whatever happens now," he said, "we face it together, and we face it as free people." Maya squeezed his hand back, feeling the wooden bird in her pocket and thinking of her grandfather who had carved it with such love. He had taught her that the most beautiful things in life were those that grew naturally, without force or control. Now she was about to find out if that was true for human lives as well. Together, they disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a world of predetermined destinies and walking toward a future that was entirely their own to create. The first 3 weeks of freedom were the hardest days of Maya's life. She and Alex had walked for hours through the mountain forests, following paths that Alex's sister had described in her secret letters. They slept under trees, drank from streams, and ate whatever berries and nuts they could find. Maya's feet were covered in blisters. Her clothes were torn, and she was exhausted in ways she had never imagined possible. But every morning when she woke up and realized she was still free, still making her own choices, she felt a strength growing inside her that made all the pain worth it. For the first time in her life, she was truly alive. The breakthrough came when they reached a small town at the base of the mountains. Alex had an address written on a piece of paper. A contact his sister had left for emergencies. The house belonged to Father Michael, an elderly priest who had spent years helping people escape from isolated communities like theirs. Father Michael was a kind man with gentle eyes and hands that shook slightly when he poured them tea. He didn't ask many questions about where they came from or why they were running. Instead, he simply said, "You're safe now. That's all that matters." He helped them understand the basics of life in the outside world, how to get identification papers, how to find work, how to rent a place to live. Most importantly, he connected them with other people who had escaped from similar situations. Maya learned she wasn't alone in her experience, that there were others who understood the unique challenges of building a new life. After living in complete control, within a month, they had found a small apartment above a bakery in the town center. Alex got a job working construction, using the skills he had learned maintaining buildings in their old community. Maya started working at the local library, and for the first time in her life, she had access to books about anything she wanted to learn. The world was overwhelming at first. Maya had never seen so many people, never had to make so many decisions about simple things like what to eat or what to wear. Sometimes she would stand in the grocery store, staring at hundreds of choices, feeling paralyzed by the freedom she had fought so hard to gain. But Alex was patient with her, helping her navigate each new challenge. They learned together how to budget their money, how to cook meals, how to be a couple without anyone telling them how to act or what to do. It was awkward sometimes, figuring out how to love each other without the fear of being caught. But it was also beautiful. Maya discovered she had a gift for learning. Years of controlled education had taught her to absorb information quickly, and now she could choose what to study. She devoured books about history, science, art, and literature. She learned about the world beyond their mountain community, about different cultures and ways of life she had never imagined existed. But freedom came with its own struggles. Maya had nightmares almost every night, dreams where she was back in the facility, being told what to do and when to do it. She would wake up in cold sweats, checking to make sure she was still in their little apartment, still free to make her own choices. Alex had his own struggles too. He worried constantly that they would be found, that somehow the community would track them down and force them back. He had given up his entire family to help Maya escape, and sometimes the weight of that sacrifice was almost too much to bear. During their second year of freedom, something happened that changed everything. Maya discovered she was going to have a baby. The news hit them both like a thunderbolt. They had been so focused on building their new life that they hadn't really planned for this possibility. At first, Maya was terrified. Having a baby reminded her too much of the breeding program she had escaped from. She worried that maybe she was just fulfilling her biological destiny after all, that maybe the elders had been right about her purpose in life. But as the weeks passed, Maya began to realize something important. This baby was different from everything she had been taught about in the facility. This baby was created from love, not from duty. This baby would grow up with choices, with freedom, with parents who saw him or her as a complete person rather than just a means to an end. Alex was nervous about becoming a father, but he was also excited. He had grown up in a world where children were seen as property of the community rather than individuals. Now he had the chance to raise a child who would know from the very beginning that his or her thoughts and feelings mattered. They decided to name the baby River, Whether it was a boy or girl, rivers were free, always moving, always finding their own path around obstacles. It seemed like the perfect name for a child who would grow up knowing that freedom was their birthright. River was born on a sunny morning in spring, healthy and strong. Maya held her daughter for the first time and felt a love so powerful it took her breath away. This wasn't the mechanical process of reproduction she had been trained for. This was pure, overwhelming, protective love. As River grew, Maya and Alex worked hard to give her everything they had never had: choices, encouragement, and the knowledge that she was valuable simply for being herself. They never told her she had to be anything specific or follow any predetermined path. Instead, they watched with wonder as she developed her own personality, her own interests, her own dreams. Maya went back to school during River's early years, studying child development and education. She discovered that her experiences in the facility, as painful as they had been, gave her unique insights into how children learned and grew. She became passionate about helping other children who had experienced trauma or control. Alex started his own small construction business, specializing in building homes for families. He found deep satisfaction in creating safe, comfortable spaces where people could live freely and make their own choices. Every house he built felt like a small victory against the world of control they had left behind. But even as they built their new life, the past never completely disappeared. Maya still had days when the weight of her experiences felt overwhelming. She found a therapist who specialized in helping people who had escaped from controlling environments and slowly learned to process the trauma she had lived through. River grew into a bright, curious child who asked endless questions about everything. Maya and Alex answered all of them honestly, age-appropriately, but honestly. They wanted her to grow up knowing that questions were good, that curiosity was valuable, that thinking for herself was one of the most important skills she could develop. When River was 5 years old, she asked Maya why they didn't have any grandparents or aunts and uncles like her friends did. Maya realized it was time to start explaining, very carefully, where they had come from and why they lived the way they did. Sometimes, Maya told her daughter, people grow up in places where they don't get to make their own choices. Mama and Papa came from a place like that. We left so that we could choose our own life, and so that you could grow up free to choose yours. River nodded seriously, processing this information in the way children do. I'm glad you chose to be free, she said simply. I like making my own choices. Maya hugged her daughter tightly, feeling grateful for every single day of the life they had built together. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been perfect, but it had been theirs to create, and that made all the difference in the world. 15 years had passed since Maya and Alex first stepped into freedom. River was now a teenager, smart and confident, with her mother's determination and her father's gentle strength. Maya had become a respected counselor in their community, helping children and families heal from trauma. Alex's construction business was thriving, and they had built a life that felt solid and real. But the past has a way of finding you, even when you think you've left it far behind. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening while Maya was helping River with homework. The voice on the other end was professional but kind. My name is Detective Rodriguez. I'm investigating a case involving the Mountain Valley community. I believe you might have information that could help us. Maya's blood ran cold. She hadn't heard the community's official name spoken aloud in years. Her hands started shaking as she gripped the phone. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number, she said, though her voice betrayed her fear. Maya, I know this is scary, Detective Rodriguez said gently, but we've been working with former members of the community for 2 years now. We know about the facility, about the program, about what happened to you and the other girls. We need your help to make sure it never happens again. That night, Maya barely slept. She told Alex about the call, and they held each other in the darkness, both remembering the fear they had lived with for so long. River noticed something was wrong and asked questions, but Maya wasn't ready to explain. How do you tell your teenage daughter that the world she's always known as safe and free isn't the only world that exists. The next morning, Detective Rodriguez came to their house. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. That reminded Maya of the therapist who had helped her process her trauma years earlier. With her was a younger man who introduced himself as James, a lawyer who specialized in cases involving isolated communities. The Mountain Valley community was raided 6 months ago. Detective Rodriguez explained, "We found evidence of systematic abuse, forced marriages, and the breeding program you escaped from. 17 girls were rescued from the facility, some as young as 14. Maya felt sick. 14. She had been 17 when she was taken, and she had thought that was young. The idea that the elders had been taking girls even younger made her furious and heartbroken at the same time. We've arrested several of the community's leaders," James continued, "but we need testimony from people who experienced the program firsthand. Your story could be crucial in making sure these men never have the opportunity to hurt anyone else." Maya looked at Alex, then at River, who was listening from the doorway despite being told to stay in her room. This was the moment she had been dreading and preparing for her entire adult life, the moment when her past and present would collide. "I need time to think," Maya said, "and I need to talk to my family about what this means for us." That evening, Maya and Alex sat River down and told her the full story of where they had come from and why they had left. River listened with wide eyes, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just absorbing the reality that her parents had lived through something so different from the world she knew. "So you were supposed to have a baby with someone you didn't choose?" River asked, trying to understand. "Someone the old men picked for you?" "Yes," Maya said simply. "But I chose your father instead. I chose love instead of duty. I chose freedom instead of safety." River was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I think you should help those other girls. If someone had helped you, maybe you wouldn't have had to be so scared for so long." Maya realized her daughter was right. She had spent 15 years healing from her trauma, building a new life, and finding peace. But there were girls who were still trapped, still being told that their only value was their ability to produce children for someone else's vision of the future. The decision to testify was one of the hardest Maya had ever made. It meant reliving the worst period of her life in front of strangers, lawyers, and a jury. It meant having her story scrutinized, questioned, and possibly doubted. Most frightening of all, it meant that her carefully constructed private life would become public. But when Maya walked into the courtroom for the first time, she saw something that gave her courage. Sitting in the gallery were other women like her, women who had escaped, women who had survived, women who had found the strength to rebuild their lives. They were there to support each other, to bear witness to the truth, and to make sure that their voices were finally heard. Maya's testimony lasted 3 days. She spoke about the selection process, the facility, the systematic way the community had tried to strip away her identity and replace it with their vision of what she should be. She talked about the fear, the control, and the desperate hope that had eventually led her to escape. The defense lawyers tried to make her seem like a confused young woman who had misunderstood what was happening to her. They suggested that the community had been trying to help her, to give her purpose and direction. But Maya had spent 15 years learning to trust her own voice, her own experiences, her own truth. "I was 17 years old," she said firmly. "I was taken from my family and told that my only value was my ability to have children with a man I didn't choose. I was told that my thoughts, my dreams, my desires didn't matter. That's not help. That's not guidance. That's abuse." The most difficult part of the trial came when Maya had to face Dr. Helen, the woman who had overseen the facility. Dr. Helen looked older, smaller than Maya remembered, but her eyes still held that same cold calculation that had haunted Maya's nightmares for years. "You were given every opportunity to succeed," Dr. Helen said from the witness stand. "You were provided with excellent nutrition, education, and medical care. You were being prepared for the most important role a woman can have, motherhood. Maya felt 15 years of healing and growth give her the strength to respond. Motherhood is beautiful when it's chosen, she said, when it comes from love, from a desire to create and nurture life. What you did wasn't about motherhood. It was about control. It was about reducing human beings to their biological functions. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, Maya felt a weight she had carried for 15 years finally lift from her shoulders. The men who had controlled her life, who had tried to determine her future, who had hurt so many other girls, would never be able to do it again. But the real victory came later, when Maya was approached by a young woman named Lisa, one of the girls who had been rescued from the facility. Lisa was 19 now, about the same age Maya had been when she escaped. "I wanted to thank you," Lisa said, "for being brave enough to tell your story, for showing us that we could build different lives. I'm starting college next month. I'm going to study social work, like you. I want to help other people who have been through what we went through." Maya hugged Lisa tightly, feeling the circle of healing complete itself. She had been saved by Alex's courage and love, by Father Michael's kindness, by the therapist who had helped her process her trauma. Now she was part of saving others, part of breaking the cycle of control and abuse. River, now 18 and preparing for college herself, had watched her mother throughout the trial with pride and admiration. "I always knew you were brave," she told Maya after the verdict. "But I didn't know how brave until now." Maya looked at her daughter, confident, free, full of choices and possibilities, and realized that this was her greatest victory. Not just escaping the system herself, but ensuring that River would grow up in a world where she could be anything she wanted to be. Years later, Maya would often speak at conferences and workshops about surviving controlling environments. She would tell audiences that healing was possible, that freedom was worth fighting for, and that the most powerful thing anyone could do was to choose their own path, even when it seemed impossible. The girl who had been programmed to breed had become a woman who helped others find their own voices. She had learned that the most important choice anyone could make was the choice to be themselves, fully and completely, no matter what others expected of them, and every day. When Maya looked at River and saw a young woman who had never doubted her right to make her own choices, she knew that her journey had been worth every difficult step along the way.